You need storylines. You need villains. That's the key. Villains.
New week, new show, same old host, same old bit. Zach, I won't spoil it. This is the week of all weeks to do it. Tell me, when does spring training begin?
We're here, my friend.
Now what are you going to say at the end of the show? I don't know.
1 year till spring training 2026.
We're almost here. We're almost here. Guys are starting to show up, and Super Bowl just happened, just wrapped up last night. What do you got? I know you got something.
It's funny because I was thinking during the fourth quarter, because the game was a bust. I was thinking there are two things that I can't stand that baseball writers all tweet. And
oh no, you're gonna do it.
Teams do it too. It's one, when the trade deadline, when you get to the actual deadline, 6 p.m. or whatever it is, and everyone tweets, pencils down. I hate that. And then two, this is so get off my lawn. My God, I said I was going to stop this year. Maybe this is just who I am now. The second thing is
now?
The instant the Super Bowl ends.
Been.
The instant the Super Bowl ends. Finally, or now it's baseball season, or like there's no basketball going on. There's nothing else in the world. And fine, if you were going to do it last night, okay. But I love when it's like an instant classic. It's overtime. There's a game-winning field goal. It's 34-31 or something. And then it's like, now it's baseball season. It's like, can we savor this for a minute here? I understand. Okay, last night was a blowout.
No, that's not how we operate.
But I will also say, I went to bed last night, and I actually did feel like, whoa. It feels like legitimate that we could talk about baseball. It feels like for weeks we've forced it, maybe. We're trying to think of things that... Sorry, I'm giving away our secrets. But it's just, I don't know. I'm counting down till spring training, and it's just... But now it's here. It actually is here. So I wanted to come on here and bash everybody who posts, oh, now it's baseball season. But I mentally was posting that last night too.
Why are we the same? I'm so glad I just let you say the thing, because I actually wrote down the teams. There is a sprint to the phone, to the keyboard, to the computer. Who could be the first person that says, our turn now? It's inevitable. And you can't, the poor social media people, they can't schedule that. You don't know when the Super Bowl is going to end. So you legitimately have to be sitting there waiting for the game to end. Now, I will say one thing. I think I'll disagree with you. You said it was kind of a snooze fest last night. I know this isn't a football podcast, but I want to bring this to baseball eventually. So trust me, we'll get there. You watched a game where people outside of the local Kansas City area, everyone outside of that area is probably rooting for the Eagles. And then there's people like me who often, when I watch a game, I just want to see a good one. I don't really care. And sometimes I will find myself rooting for whoever's behind, but if they go ahead, then I root for the other team to come back and make it a game. And I just want craziness. I want zaniness. That's what I'm rooting for. But last night I found myself enjoying every single long pass, every single pick six, every single sack. It didn't matter that it was not a game. It didn't to me, because I was getting so much enjoyment out of watching the Goliath that is the Kansas City Chiefs get their heads kicked in. And it was fun. It didn't need to be a close game for me to get extreme enjoyment out of it. And I was thinking about how this is often the case in all sports. We've seen it in baseball too, where you have a team. You go back several years ago when Patrick Mahomes first burst onto the scene, and the Chiefs haven't been a legitimate threat in a while. They've had some glimpses here and there. And they're a young, fun team, and you haven't seen them for a while really be this good, or maybe even ever for some fans, ever just see them be this consistently good, and you couldn't wait to see them on every national stage. But what happens as that team gets more and more exposure? They get to where the Chiefs are now. You can't stand them, and you just legitimately want to see them get beat. it's like this process that happens with every team that is considered to be a dynasty. And the Yankees are there constantly. I don't think they'll ever leave the territory of being I get extreme enjoyment out of seeing them just get beat. It doesn't matter if it's 17-0. I will enjoy that. It doesn't have to be a close game. But it is. I thought maybe we could dissect that. What are the elements, Zach, that leads a team from being the young, hip team that you haven't seen in a while? Maybe the Baltimore Orioles have been that here recently in baseball, to the point where, oh my gosh, them again? They're back. They're back in the championship game again. Who are they playing? God, I hope they kill them. Like it just happens in all sports, it seems like.
Yeah, football does the thing that helps it too is, I mean, I'm engrossed last night because I needed Devontae Smith to have one more yard. And so there are ways you can stay glued into it even if the game is not close. I think, yeah, you texted me this last night and I spent all night thinking about it. I didn't sleep. And
because of my question or because of a baby? I don't know.
Because Devontae Smith didn't get that 1 yard. I just told you. So it's interesting. Like one team that came to mind was remember when the Pistons upset the Lakers 20-ish years ago, and the Lakers had won 3 straight, and then I think the Spurs snuck in there and won 1 year. Maybe I might be remembering this wrong, but then the Pistons upset the Lakers. No one thought that series was even going to be close, and it was shocking, and it was really cool because it was, you slay the dragon, right? So this didn't feel so much like that. And it was a 1-point spread. So like it was essentially a coin flip. It felt more to me like the Patriots, because for a period of 20 years, the Patriots were usually in the Super Bowl, like about half the time. And they didn't win all of them, but like I like at some point, the Patriots upset the Rams. And it was like, whoa, is this crazy upset? Like the Rams already had their Super Bowl. Like this is really cool. What an underdog story. And as a world, we love that. And then the Patriots make it back and you get tired of them. And it's like, okay, enough. And then you're rooting for that underdog to defeat them. But baseball, it's difficult because so much of the narrative is dictated by the market. And you're not going to have those feelings if it's, Kansas City and Pittsburgh in the World Series. That's why it was Yankees Dodgers and everyone's saying like, this is perfect for baseball. Like they're getting everything they want. And like, yeah, New York, LA, lots of superstars. Sure. But if you're not in those cities, you're watching that World Series rooting for the Meteor. So
bad guy versus bad guy.
Yeah, it's an interesting narrative. I keep coming back to this conversation I had with Evan Drellick about, and he covers like the labor of baseball and the finances and everything. And we were talking about just payrolls and stuff. This is a year or two ago. And the thing we agreed on was that, especially in baseball, it's just healthy to have storylines that can captivate an entire country because that's rare now. And so in that sense, like the Yankees are good for baseball, right? The Dodgers are good for baseball. Obviously, there are many reasons why they're not. But if you could have had Guardians Yankees, like what percentage of the country was rooting for the Guardians? I don't even remember, but I would imagine that if you lived in Montana and you just loved baseball, you were probably rooting for the Guardians. If you lived in a small market city with a baseball team, you're probably rooting for the Guardians last year. And if it was Guardians Dodgers, I feel like the Guardians would have been the darling of the country, right? Instead, you got big market, and what fun was that? And it wasn't even a good series. Like at least if it goes 7 games, it could be enthralling. So he was just saying, you need storylines, you need villains. That's the key, villains. So are the Chiefs a villain? Or did they need to win even more to get to that status? Or was this just like, yeah, like this is a team that, I mean, the Chiefs have been a dynasty, but like, I don't know. Is it more that we're just tired of them, or is it more like they're bad guys we love to hate?
I don't know what gets you there, and I think you can get there a few different ways. One is just being constantly discussed. At some point, you're just fatigued over that team. There's probably some of that with Kansas City. I think another element of this is there's a perception that has become a full-blown meme that if the Chiefs aren't winning, the referees, the Zebras, are going to find a way to flip the script. And so that's what made it almost even more impressive and fun last night, is that the referees weren't giving Kansas City every call. And it was like, yeah, even the referees are all over them. So I think there has to be, to get full-blown heel status, bad guy status, people have to perceive that you're not playing the game the right way, or that you're getting extra help on top of being a good team. And even in the case of the Chiefs, you had a couple of weeks ago Troy Aikman even pointing out, look at this guy. He's begging for the extra hit on the sideline. He's pausing as he's exiting the field because he's looking for that flag. And people see that and go, are you kidding me? You already get every call. And now you're actually baiting the officials to try to get more out of them. And so that's probably what took them over the top, especially for me watching the games. It took it over the top. And so to bring this back to baseball, I feel like it's not a real one-to-one here, but I do feel some similarities between where the Chiefs are at and where I feel the Astros have been in several years. Now, the Astros, there's legitimate proof of cheating.
Those are
here,
villains.
going beyond what they're supposed to do. And for Cleveland, it hurts even more because the Indians at the time were part of that perception, and maybe even some proof there of someone being where they weren't supposed to be outside of a dugout. That adds that fuel to being the bad guy. Do you feel any similarities between where the Astros are at and where the Chiefs are at? Is that an unfair comparison because the Astros legitimately got caught cheating, whereas the Chiefs, there's just a perception that somehow they're always getting that additional call or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Astros are one time, they went through a lengthy rebuild, and then they were the young, upstart, fun team that...
Yeah, they were lovable for a while.
And then... I just think we have short not attention span, but like short windows of enjoying people. we get tired of people quickly. We want new blood in things, I think. And so like the Astros are the young up and coming team, and then they win one, and then it's like, okay, go away now. And then they're back, and they're just teams that are good for a long time. I mean, like, where do the 90s Indians fall into this? Because in 95, that team was captivating, right? And by 2001, you're probably like, ugh, this team, they're still going for a World Series? Like, enough already. And they were never, they're never a villain.
Yeah, see, that's what's interesting about it. Do you have to win one to be tiresome?
Yes, I think so. Because you need to feel like you were wronged. Like, that team beat my team. They stood in my team. I thought we were going to win the World Series, and that team took it from us. They are now the villain to me. Or they've got, I mean, that if the Indians win the World Series in 95, I think they become that.
Oh, sure.
For sure, right? Like they were the cockiest team to never win a World Series, and deservedly so. They were just obliterating people or just twiddling their thumbs until the bottom of the ninth and then walking off people. But look at the personalities. I mean, Albert Bell, like he's perfect for that role. Even like Kenny Lofton and Carlos Baerga, those guys were cocky. So.
And they embraced it. There's that cockiness. They embraced it. And you have the case of Bell and his bat, and he's just like, you know what? No, I'm the dude here, flexing the bicep, just leaning into the villain role.
Yeah, if they win it in 95, no one's rooting for them to win it in 96. They're rooting for the plucky upstart Yankees, right? Behind their young shortstop Derek Jeter. Look at this kid. He's a great rookie. So I think winning is almost always necessary here. I keep coming back to that Lakers team because I've never loved a team more than I adored the late 90s, early 2000s Sacramento Kings. Don't ask me why or how. With Mike Bibby and Chris Webber and Peja Stojakovic and Vlade Divac, Doug Christie, Brad Miller. And that team got completely hosed by Tim Donaghy and the refs in the 2002 Western Conference Finals against the Lakers. And so to me, like, those Lakers teams were the biggest villains of my childhood. And I couldn't stand. And then they get to the finals, and the East was an absolute joke at that time. And you had like the Nets in the finals every year getting swept. And so that's why I just remember that Pistons series so vividly, because it was so great to see them get their comeuppance. I mean, it's honestly like, we could compare this to wrestling. Like, it's the heel. You get, you hate the heel, and then you get bored of the heel, and then you're just begging for some. It's better when it's out of nowhere. The young hotshot face taking down the heel than like some whatever taking down the heel, right? Does that make sense?
You got to build it up right. You got to have the chase.
Yeah, but you want to make sure it's not someone who it's like, okay, like, here's the crown. I'm putting it on you now. And you're like, ooh, this is cool. Like, this is fresh. This is new. Not some retread.
Yeah. I do wonder, as this goes in cycles, some teams, can they ever... how long would the Yankees have to be bad? Like, legitimately bad. I'm not talking about where, we have won a World Series, and not that. I mean bad. How long would they have to be bad before teams would or fans would just want to see the Yankees win? Would it have to be a unique group of players? Because I look at a team like the Red Sox. I feel like the Red Sox can do this successfully. You go back to when they had their drought, and I just watched the Netflix documentary on the comeback, and
it was good.
It was a very good documentary. I loved it. A great off-season thing, because it kind of gets the juices flowing a little bit for baseball. And seeing some familiar faces.
That is the movie I watched in 2024.
There you go. But they can do it. They can be a little bit of a chameleon, so that now, if the Red Sox were to come back, and excuse whatever Cleveland does, but let's say the Red Sox make it to the postseason, I kind of feel like, okay, they've been bad for a little bit, and if they're going up against the right bad team, not bad team, but bad guy of a team, whether it's the Dodgers or the Yankees or whoever, you feel like, okay, I can see myself rooting for them. But they also very quickly get to the point of, oh my God, not the Red Sox again. Not them again. So some teams can successfully float between, they could be a little bit of a chameleon. Whereas the other ones, the Dodgers, no one nationally, I don't think, is going to be rooting for the Dodgers. Unless you are just the most casual of casual baseball fans, and hey, I really like the superstars here that they have in Los Angeles.
But that's why, isn't it more fulfilling if the Dodgers lose in the playoffs to the Reds than the Mets?
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
The Red Sox are interesting. I was thinking about them too, because in 2004, I think the way you do it matters too. They're always helped by having the Yankees over their shoulder. So when you think Red Sox, you don't think big market, big payroll, even though they usually are those things, because the Yankees, they're competing with the Yankees every single year. So the Yankees are always going to outspend them. So you do almost think of the Red Sox, and especially with the players that they had in 2004, it's like Kevin Millar and Bill Miller and guys like that, Mark Bellhorn. They had Pedro and Schilling, but like, a lot of those guys were journeyman veterans, and also the whole, they're saying cowboy up, and they're taking shots of whiskey, and like, that didn't feel like, they felt like the underdog, and then they're down 3-0, and it's, so that suited them well. And I think that's a good example of, also, everybody was tired of the Yankees. They won 4 World Series in 5 years. Then they lost to the Marlins the year before. And I think you're just exhausted. You're fatigued. Like, give me something fresh. So to see the Red Sox beat them, dethrone them the way they did, is exactly what you're talking about. But, by 2007, like, were casuals rooting for the Red Sox over the Indians in the ALCS. I mean, you're kind of tired of them by now, right? Like, so it can go both ways. I mean, and history matters in this too. Like, if the Cubs weren't, this is going to be impossible for our listeners to try to envision. But if the Cubs were not playing the Indians, if the Cubs were playing the Yankees in the 2016 World Series, the whole country's rooting for the Cubs because of the drought, because they want to see history, because you want to see the lovable loser finally get their day. So it so much depends on the matchup, so much depends on how you get there. I feel like the Cubs and the Red Sox are kind of similar in that regard, which is why I still think like 03, both of those LCSs were insane. And it looked very much like it was going to be Red Sox Cubs, and I'm not sure what would have happened like with those two droughts and who would have rooted for whom. So, yeah, I think, and this is, I feel like I probably spend too much time thinking about this stuff because it's like the writer, it's the romantic in me that's saying like, oh, these storylines have to be crafted perfectly, and all these fans are just gonna be thinking along these lines when it's not necessarily always the case, but it makes for better theater. And I think that's what you want sports to be in the end.
Yeah, I mean, go back to, you already mentioned 2016, between two teams that have these long championship droughts. So that story writes itself. 97, here's the Indians trying to go back and win that World Series that eluded them 2 years before, and they're up against a team that's barely been in Major League Baseball, still in diapers in terms of franchises go in baseball, that have hired all of these veteran, really strong players to come in here and just kind of like the Old West, just come in to do a job and then on to the next city. And that's what that Marlins team ended up being. And then even 95, where, of course, at the time, the drought hasn't extended to what it has now, but the Indians have been just bad for so long that it feels like the drought's worse than it even was in that moment. But who are they playing? They're playing a Braves team that is close to where the end of the Indians' run was in the 90s, where their championship has eluded them, and they have this great talent. And how has this team not won one? And that's the team they get to play in 95. And, of course, it adds to us having watched it. It adds to the I really don't like the Braves element here when now there is the perception, not just the perception, I go back and watch the games of them getting every call behind the plate. A team that has historically great Hall of Fame pitchers on it, and you're giving them 6 inches off the plate. I don't think they need the help. But it adds to that. And that 95 team, you've got to see a couple of them here recently.
Yeah. It's 30 years, which makes me feel old and also makes me wonder, are they still relevant?
Ooh, we went there.
And I say that as someone who wrote a book chronicling that 95 season five years ago now. Wow. But I wonder, it was at the Cleveland Sports Awards last week, and they did a fireside chat where Chris Rose was talking with Mike Hargrove, Charles Nagy, Kenny Lofton, and Jim Thome. And this is not to diminish what they accomplished or diminish what, like, conversations with those guys are always great, but I felt like it was the same conversations we have heard over and over and over. And I just wonder, unless someone has some new Albert Bell acting like Albert Bell stories, I'm not sure what's left to squeeze out of that season. And then I wonder, I was born in 89. Like, a lot of what I know about that season is from really catching on to baseball a few years later and going back and rewatching Wahoo What a Finish, and then reading about it and writing about it. And I wonder, for people younger than me, do you even care? And I wonder how much, understand like 30-year anniversary makes sense. Okay, fine. But like, should we be doing more 2016 stuff? Should we be doing more 2007 stuff? I just wonder how much relevancy the 95 team has to people younger than us, because that is a big portion of, I mean, you see like these crowds, right? Like they're catering Progressive Field to younger crowds. Everything's a beer garden. Like you're going to see it this year. Now, at second base, there's going to be a new beer garden. They have automatic dispensers where you go on the field between innings and you know. But like it's you go on a Friday night and it's full of young people, young adults, and go to the corner and ask them how much they know about or how much they care about the 95 team. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just curious because to us, like that was when we were really young. You're a little older than me, so you caught on at the perfect time. But if you're 25, if you're born in 2000, do you care about a team that existed before you were born? For us, like those teams all stunk. So it's a little bit of a different equation here. And no one wants to talk about the 1983 Indians, but I'm just curious. That's all.
Well, I don't think it's for us to answer.
No.
We can throw it out there, but we need people that aren't us to answer that question. One thing I was thinking about as we were just pondering this topic is I'm wondering what was the season for all of our listeners? What was the first season that you really remember? I mean, I have knowledge of before 95, but the first season that I really remember is 1995 for me. And I also think there's some element, when we talked about this before, I think somebody yelled at us, like, this is still history. It's not, you can't say that it doesn't matter. I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. The same way I would say that World War II matters, but I wasn't alive to see it, so I can't connect to the emotions of the moment the same way that someone that lived through it can. I can read up about it. I can watch every documentary as I get older. That's just part of, you get handed your white shoes and your World War II documentaries as you get older. I'm wondering with the 95 team, when you didn't experience it, can you still get the same level of enjoyment as someone who lived through the moment? Again, this is just us asking the question. And I would be curious, drop them into the comments. The first season you remember, shoot us a note on Discord, and we can maybe revisit this later this week during the Patreon show. What was that first season for you? And does if you weren't really part of experiencing your fandom or even alive for the 95 season, what part does that play in your Cleveland fandom at all? I'd be curious to know. For those that did experience it and for those that are older than us that listen to this show, we still love you too. We know what it meant to you. And in some ways, I know it means more to you even than it meant to me, because that was my first experience. For someone that grew up watching the 70s and 80s and seeing a lot of bad teams, that 95 group, God, it had to have meant just so much. But I am more curious as we get further and further away from 1995. Is that something we still bring it up and we talk about it on this show? Is that something where people just kind of tune out now? It's not a big deal to younger fans, or maybe it is. That's what we need to know. It's not up to us to decide really here. We need our fans, our listeners to tell us.
Baseball was in a weird place that year because you had the strike, and I think it was Cleveland and Texas were the only teams whose attendance did not decrease in 95. People were pissed. There were no playoffs the prior year. You pulled the rug in mid-August, and for a while it didn't look like no one knew when they were going to start back up in 95 either. So Cleveland was, and this plays a part in why that era was so successful and why there was the sellout streak. Cleveland was like the one haven where baseball was still special and it mattered. And there was a renaissance in Cleveland. And they really were the perfect, I don't even want I don't want to say David or underdog because nothing about that team resembled an underdog, but they were the perfect team for like what we're talking about here. The team that you're excited to see that first time that they make it. Like if they would have won the World Series, I think everyone would have been like, you know what? They deserved it. That was a really fun team to watch start to finish. They're brand new. It stunk for 4 decades. And look at the personalities on that team. The personalities, the magic, and the sluggers of the 95. So, but they didn't win. But I think it proves our point that they got a parade in downtown Cleveland, even though they didn't win. How many teams can say that? You get the only teams I've ever known that got a parade for not winning were them and the 0-16 Browns. Very different parades. So I think they were the perfect. The one thing that like kind of hurts the argument is that the Braves, like they hadn't won one. They had this amazing pitching. They were in the World Series or the NLCS seemingly every single year, and this was their crowning moment. It's the only one they got in that era, which is insane because they won that division every single year. But I just wish, if they would have won the World Series, I really think they would have been like the bad boys coming back because you also know, like, they had some talkers. Like, you think Baerga was just going to be like, I'm just really grateful that we won. No, he's going to get up there and talk about how they just killed everybody and how they'd stand on the top of the dugout step right before first pitch and look at the opponents and mouth the words, "We're going to kill you." They would have been the perfect team for this exercise of going from beloved upstart group to the villain that everybody loves to hate. And they would have embraced that role. That's the thing. Maybe not Jim Thome probably would have been a fish out of water, but like everybody else, that's the other thing. Like,
you saw him flip that bat in the '95 World Series. I think he got caught up in that.
They just had some like Oral Hershiser had some of that in him. Like he,
I would bubble to the surface. How could you not when you're around other people that are exuding that part of their personality? I think it just comes out naturally, and they are a team where other teams shy away from it. They did embrace it. So would that make it fun? I mean, everything comes back to wrestling on this show. You had this for years and years. It was always, cookie cutter good guy, Hulk Hogan, eat your vitamins and say your prayers, and then the bad guy that everyone absolutely hated. And then you got to the Attitude Era, and the bad guys were cool and you liked them, and it just blurred the lines between what is good and what is bad. Stone Cold Steve Austin is just raising middle fingers and that's the guy I'm supposed to be cheering. But yes, because they're so cool in doing it. The Rock, when you watch The Rock, watch him cut promos and he's making fun of everybody. That's not what a good guy would do, but I love him. So I wonder if that 95 group, if they had won it, and then they just doubled down, tripled down on that, and just kept reinforcing that. And also, the moves that they made would have been so different. Maybe this isn't the time to do this, because we're talking about, is this still relevant? But now I'm going to open up this whole can of worms. It would be curious to know, if they won that World Series in 95, how do things change? Because they made so many moves in 96 and 97 because they were still chasing that championship. And they made moves that are maybe even uncharacteristic to what they would have done otherwise if they didn't feel so desperate to win the championship. So if they win it in 95, what moves are different? Are they trading prospects that they shouldn't trade like they do in the scenario we saw? Or are they holding on to Burnitz and Giles? Or, are they going in a different direction if they win that championship in 1995?
Are they more inclined to pull off a trade for Pedro Martinez or Randy Johnson, or less inclined? I almost think more. You got your World Series. Take more of a risk to get another one.
What do you got to lose? You already got your title. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, I also wonder if it would have been easier to keep Albert Bell, some of the free agents they lost. I mean, maybe they don't need to trade Lofton because they're not worried about him leaving because Bell re-signed. Because why would you want to go anywhere else? I don't know. It might be a question for John Hart for an upcoming article.
Well, that's what we do here. We just give you fuel for your future articles.
I mean,
we do a pretty good job of that.
MLB Network did that documentary about 10 years ago that was pretty good. And they called it The Dynasty That Never Was. And it's fitting because it truly could have. I mean, if they win in 95, remember, I know they made some moves and the players were unhappy. Eddie Murray was gone. They just couldn't. Baerga fell off a cliff and they could not figure out second base. They won 99 games. And the Orioles just smoked them in the division series. But, I mean, I think they were probably everybody's pick to at least get back to the World Series.
Get back, yeah.
They should have won it in 97. 98, the Yankees were the best team start to finish. Indians led that series 2-1 at one point. So, and 99,
yeah, pretty evenly matched.
99, the Indians were a trendy pick too because they scored 1,000 runs. They didn't have pitching, but who cares? So, like, you see how they were so close in so many different seasons that if they win the one, maybe it takes pressure off the organization and you're making aggressive moves because they're the right thing to do, not because you're desperate. I don't know. That's interesting. You're right. We just said, was this still relevant? And then we tacked on 15 minutes.
But see, this is why you and I can't answer this question.
Right.
Because you and I could do this for hours, and we would be cool with that. But I have to realize this is bigger than us. This is people tuning in. I need you to tell us whether or not this is good, whether you like us going on these tangents about the 90s Indians, or if it's dudes. Guys, you need to do more of that with teams that I actually got to watch.
Well,
that's why this question needs to be asked.
Well, and so let's spin it forward this way. I think part of the reason that 95 team gets the limelight at the Sports Awards 30 years later is because of the personalities and the stars. I mean, Jim Thome was a first ballot Hall of Famer who had 612 home runs. Kenny Lofton, we're going to talk about his Hall of Fame case all year, I think, and hopefully he'll get on that committee ballot and get in. But, he has personality and he maybe should have been Hall of Famer, right? So there's personalities and everyone has stories about Albert Bell and Manny Ramirez. And I think that helps the aura of that team. That helps the lore. So my question would be 20 years from now, what are we saying about the 2016 team? And maybe they'll have won a World Series by then and no other team will matter, right? Like we never talk about the 2007 Cavs. Like, are they going to bring back Shannon Brown and Drew Gooden and
they should.
Flip Murray and
they should.
Ira Newble and Ben Wallace? Like or Ben Wallace wasn't on that team yet. Who was a backup big man? God, I was at every single one of those games too. I don't know. Eric Snow and Sasha Pavlovich going to do a roundtable. But
this sounds awesome.
For us, again, relevancy here. But the 2016
that's the
team, the 2016 team, do you think you're going to want to hear about that team in 2046?
I don't know. Because so much of the 95 team is unique to that team. It's the personalities. It is the future and current stars and Hall of Famers that were part of that group, and just putting together a team that is so unique that it's hard to do that and have the buildup go in that way that it results in a team like that. 16 is great, but so much of what made 16 fun was from the trade deadline on. Is there any really compelling stories that take place before the attempted trade for Lucroy and the eventual trade for Andrew Miller?
A 14-game winning streak. The 14th win coming in Toronto on Canada Day with a 19th inning home run by Carlos Santana.
Off of a position player, right? Didn't they bring in a position player in that game?
Ryan Goins, I think.
Yeah. Goins gone.
Daniel Marshall, by the way.
There you go.
Friend of the pod.
yeah, so much of 95 even takes place before 95. Like when you start telling the story of the 95 team, it doesn't begin in 95. You have to go back to the late 80s at least, and even that you could probably extend further back. So I don't know. Again, this is why we have an audience. It's not just you and me, it's all of us. And so I think we need some guidance from our listeners. Do you enjoy us being old dudes now, just talking about how much better it was in our youth, or should we go a different direction? I don't know. Tell us. And I also want to know that first team for you that really sparked your fandom. What was your first experience like? We're blessed because we get those great 90s teams to really help form our fandom. But for those that maybe were in a darker time, how did you get to the point where you're at in your Cleveland baseball lore?
Yeah, and just like a final thing, I don't want to come off sounding like I'm bashing the 95 team and I never want to hear from these guys again. I wrote a book about that team. Like I have fond memories, and it was a joy to fill in blanks that I didn't necessarily know about because I was too young during the writing process. I just think we talk about that team a lot. And, if you're 19 years old and you love baseball in Cleveland, and you might have even been too young for the '07 team, like, I feel like it's okay. I feel like we can start talking 2016 or talking.
No, I give you credit. You know why? We're all certainly guilty of this as we all get older. We get blinded by, what we grew up with. And sometimes we let that completely blind us to new things happening in the world changing and continuing to evolve. That's certainly me with music. I'm still listening to the same stuff that I listened in the mid-2000s and early 2010s, and I haven't evolved beyond that. So it extends back to mid-90s up through, I don't know, mid-2010s at the very latest, and that's where my music has stuck, and it's not evolved beyond that. But it also, I have to accept that as I'm watching a halftime show that it's not for me, I again have to realize not everything is made for me. And I think this is just you trying to understand.
It was for you. If you understood the dynamics and play of the dissing of Drake, I think you would think it was for you.
No. I mean, sure, maybe, but no, that's not for me. And that's okay. I don't have to get mad at it. It's fine. You know what I did?
Subtle digs.
I didn't watch a minute of it. And not
like
out of protest. Not out of protest, not because of it, just because I don't enjoy it. I knew I wasn't going to enjoy it. So you know what I didn't do? Sit there in front of my television and punish myself by watching something I knew I wasn't going to enjoy. So I spent 15 minutes doing something else, and that's it. Hopefully you didn't spend 15 minutes doing something else during the show because you don't relate to the 95 team, but that's how we're asking the question.
Well, and hopefully none of your exes ever trotted out, or none of your enemies ever trotted out your ex to dance to a diss song about you in front of you on national TV.
All right, well, let me hit you with this because we haven't done this in a while.
And now it's time for the random Cleveland used to play here guy of the day.
Okay, well, I was going to do this too, so.
Are you serious?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, only because this man was in the news.
Do you want to talk,
man?
Really quick, can we talk bobbleheads? Because the Guardians just released their promo schedule. Can you guess the bobbleheads this year?
No, I can't. How many are there?
3.
3. Only 3. Okay. Jose has to get one.
No.
What? I'm sorry, what? The man you know is actually going to be here for the entire season did not get a bobblehead? That seems very
I'm pretty
unwise.
confident that none of the 3 people who have bobbleheads will be traded.
I'm going to say Tanner Bybee.
Correct. May 31st.
Ooh.
Your birthday.
Ah, nice.
Shane Bieber's birthday. They should have done a Bieber bobblehead on his birthday.
Well, again, you have to be sure that he's going to be back and pitching and on the team. Whatever. We're not going down this road. Goodness gracious. Stephen Kwan.
No.
Well, he's getting traded. Okay.
You're not going to get these.
You know what would have been awesome?
Paul Sewald.
A John Kensey Noel bobblehead commemorate. Now I can't say the word. Commemorating his home run.
It would be that'd be
like
pretty cool.
mid flip or something. I don't know. Or just the stoic look he had on his face as he rounded the bases. Like, yeah, I've done this a million times. No, you haven't.
Expected something else?
Are you not entertained? If you tell me I can't get it, then like my guess of Lane Thomas is out. I guess I don't.
July 5th, and this is very cool because it's Larry Doby Day. There will be a Larry Doby bobblehead.
Oh, okay.
And then
Totally
July
cool.
19th, Stephen Vogt. Do you think he'll still be here July 19th?
God, I hope so. Okay.
Tom
yeah, you're right.
Hamilton. Tom Hamilton celebration, August 16th. You'll get an item. I guess that could be a bobblehead or something like that. But it does not explicitly say bobblehead. That's it for bobblehead.
They've already done bobbleheads.
Stephen Kwan hat, May 10th. Could that interest you with that?
Not
Free shirt Fridays.
It would have been a Stephen Kwan journal would have been awesome.
Well, this could have been an episode. Cleveland Buckeyes cap, June 28th. That could be cool. Jose Ramirez jersey, August 2nd. Manuel Clase jersey, June 7th.
Those jersey giveaways are really valuable to the team. Yes, you give away ones of your stars, but give them away of players that are sort of brand new and emerging, because then it gets into the rotation of people that come to your games. And now, instead of having to, go to the team shop to go get something custom made, now a younger player is represented in your crowd by just doing a giveaway.
And people wear those all the time.
Yes, they do.
Well, here you go. May 26th, mystery reliever jersey. Give me wrong answers only.
Mystery reliever? Can I get a Sobrowski jersey?
Right? Like, if it's Cade Smith, tell us it's Cade Smith. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume it's Franco Alamon.
Pull like a lever and like the mystery wheel spins.
It also doesn't say it's a current player. I mean, could it be Tom Mastny?
Jeff Manship.
All right, I don't want to steal your thunder here.
I don't even remember what we were doing. Oh, yeah.
You're going to make me name somebody?
Yeah, well, this isn't too difficult, but I only did it because we haven't played the Sounder in forever, and this man was in the news. He pitched for Akron, Lynchburg. Let's see, Lynchburg in 2015, Akron in 16 and 17, again, Lynchburg in 18, Columbus in 19, and Akron in 19. Again, pitcher, left-handed. Made all these different stops. Once I tell you more of these details, you're going to get it quickly. Former first-round pick, but not of Cleveland.
Did this person make it to the majors?
Not with Cleveland, but did eventually make it to the major leagues. Former first-round pick, left-handed pitcher. Was with one team previous to Cleveland, has bounced around, now back with the original team, just signed a couple of days ago to a minor league deal with the team that made him a first-round pick back in 2013. His name
Can you
is
just tell me? I'm sort of confused here.
blast
When
from the
did
past.
he reach the majors?
2020, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, 2020.
I haven't been paying attention to the news.
St. Louis, the team that also drafted him. So he was drafted by St. Louis,
Rob
came over to
Kaminsky?
Cleveland, and Rob Kaminsky would be your answer. Yeah, he's just re-signed. I saw his name in the news. I had to do the segment. Just
That was
re-signed a minor league deal with the Cardinals.
Brandon Moss trade?
It was the Brandon Moss trade.
Who looks identical to Cleveland Guardians team historian Jeremy Fedor.
Yeah. So add a little bit of muscle to Jeremy, and yeah, I think they would. You wouldn't be able to tell them apart.
Remember, Brandon Moss was like his story was fascinating because he was in baseball and then he wasn't sure if he wanted to keep playing, and didn't he try to become became a firefighter, and then turned into a guy who hit 25 home runs, and
Yeah.
he was one of the right fielders in Cleveland's string of 13 different starting right fielders on opening day in the last 13 years.
I feel like I was catfished by him a little bit, in that I really thought he was going to come over here and be a really good player.
Would he have fit better now with the wind tunnel in right field?
They turned it off after June, don't you remember?
Oh, yeah.
The home run stopped flying apparently or something. And he was very good with Oakland. Brought that element of power. Former 30-home run bat with Oakland. And doing it at Oakland, oh my gosh. And hit the 2 home runs in the wild card game in 2014.
That crazy game with Kansas City.
Yeah. Everything goes so very different.
Who else was part of that game? Stephen Vogt.
Ah, yeah, that's right. And then he comes over to Cleveland. It's just, not good. 695 OPS, 84 OPS plus with Cleveland before he was eventually traded to St. Louis, where he was a little bit better after the trade. 51 games, put up a 105 OPS plus, 753. It did play for 2 more years after that. In 16, he had a 784 OPS plus with 28 bombs. And in 17, went to Kansas City, 85 OPS plus. That's Brandon Moss, by the way, not the former random Cleveland player of the day, but he does fall into this category.
I remember talking to Rob Kaminsky. Remember they used to do they still do like the winter development program, and we'd get to talk to the minor leaguers, and oftentimes it was minor leaguers who were not particularly close to the majors, which was always enjoyable. Like you get a little bit of a head start, and they also get a little bit of some like media training. I wish they still did that.
Why don't they do that? And don't tell me because it's under construction.
I think it became the fall development program, and then they do it in September, and so the team's playing, so there's not really a way for them to do media stuff. I don't know.
They did that. They did do that once when the team was playing. It might have been the final year that they did this.
But part of it
liked bringing they liked bringing the players in because then they actually get to see all the major leaguers going about their business, and they get to be around the team when the team is actually there. So I think they felt like there was something to be gained just from being around the club.
Josh Tomlin would always talk to them.
Yeah.
Tito would talk. Yeah, I remember talking to some minor leaguers I remember Dylan Baker, I think was his name, from Alaska, and he was a pitcher who had like crazy good numbers, and I think injuries interfered with his development.
So you think I got time to tell you about 3 players I'm interested in spring training?
My dog says yes. Go ahead.
We'll wrap up the show with this. So I was thinking about spring training beginning, and there were 3 players that we haven't talked a lot about, but I realized as I was just going over the roster, I'm really interested to see what becomes of them in spring training. I think it's a big spring for these 3 guys for various reasons. One is one that we've talked about a little bit before, but not to the same level as the other candidates for second base and even the outfield. Angel Martinez was someone that looked like last spring, there were flashes there where it's like, oh, he might actually be a dude for you. Maybe not dude, but an actual major leaguer that can play some sort of role. And then he came up last year and played a very important role, though when you looked at the overall numbers, that by the end of the year, 83 WRC+, 232, 298, 338, didn't look great, but there were times where it felt like he kind of saved their butts throughout the season when they called on him, especially early. He's a guy that had basically a 9% walk rate, and he's doing this all in his age 22 season. It's easy to forget that he's younger than some of these other players that he was also trying to get in there and make an impact with. He's off the radar as far as like the initial guys that I'm thinking of. Gabby Arias is certainly going to get a shot at second base. Juan Burrito, we both kind of expect is going to eventually emerge if it's not early in the season. I know some local media members don't like to hear it, but maybe Travis Bazzana fits into this situation later in the year. I don't know. Angel Martinez, this could feel like, to me, it feels like this could be a spring where he goes from sort of being, don't want to say forgotten, because I don't think the team has, but for us, we haven't talked a lot about him. And if he has a good spring and other guys are just kind of meh, why can't he earn that second base job?
Don't forget, part of this is because of just the lineup itself, but he came up and was hitting second for a little while there last year. So I think there's 2 buckets you put those guys in, and it's, we've seen plenty of you, and this is maybe your last chance to really stick. And we don't really know a ton about you, and this is a chance for you to just take it and run with it. And he's the one guy who we have seen, but we just haven't seen enough. And so I think he's in that second bucket, and that's why he's interesting just from the standpoint. I mean, he had a really good spring. Like, this team has liked this guy a lot in the past, and he had a really good spring last year and was kind of turning some heads. So do that again. And yeah, I mean, and especially the versatility, right? So there, of the 5 guys, Schneemann, Freeman, Brito, Arias, and Martinez, at least 2 make the roster, and it could be 3. And so you're looking for certainly a Freeman and Arias. I think at least one of them makes the roster, just because it's, hey, let's give this guy another chance, and you're versatile. You could be a utility guy if you need to be. With Martinez, he fits everything. Second baseman, they've used him in the outfield. He could be utility. They want to see more of him at the plate. So he certainly could make the team, and it's just, he's one of those guys where it's like, I haven't seen enough of him to doubt that he could take an opportunity and run with it. We don't know.
He also does feel like a guy that's easier to stash and get answers on other players before you get to him.
Sure.
But it doesn't have, he can just come into spring and just tear through it. And do everything asked of him.
It's a new regime. You know, I know they were here last year, but last year they were getting their first looks at everybody. We don't know if they want to play that way. Do they want to do the old order of operations where it's like, well, this guy has no options left, so let's see him, or this guy's 26, let's get one last look? We don't know that. Stephen Vogt might just say, you know what, I want to take the best player. I want to take the guy who looks most capable.
I'd be certainly interested seeing them go about a different way of deciding things. Second one for you is Logan Allen. What a big spring for him. I don't think he's going to win a job if everybody else is healthy and capable of starting at the beginning of the season. He probably doesn't win a job, but I'm not ruling it out. But this is also a guy that we went into spring last year saying we were very confident that this guy was a very capable 4 or 5. And maybe
his floor was pretty high.
Yeah, maybe he could get to more. And I was skeptical about it because underneath the surface, I didn't think I saw like a front-of-the-line starter, maybe even mid-rotation guy. But this is someone that looked like he was capable of giving you a 3.8 ERA towards the back of the rotation, and he obviously wasn't that. Are we ready to kick him to the curb already? That seems silly.
Where is he in the pecking order now? Like, who does he need? Who does he need to fail to make? Not even just opening day, but
I don't know if it's fail. It could just be somebody needs to start 2 weeks behind. Like that could be a way for him to open the door, but Bybee is in.
Like,
Gavin Williams is in.
Is Cantillo ahead of him?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Let's go through this real quick. Bybee's in. Williams is in. I believe Luis Ortiz is in. And so that leaves Lively and McKenzie. I would think McKenzie's in unless he just is terrible this spring. Lively is the one guy that could probably float wherever they really need him to go. As of today, I would say that he's in. Mm-hmm. And then, as you were saying, let's get to the second line here. Slade Ciccone is going to get opportunities to look like a starter early. I don't know if
he's a
factor
tough
in that
one
way.
Because I feel like he's sort of like their project of the year, where you might put him behind Logan Allen in the pecking order just because you want him to be at a certain point when you call him up. If that makes sense. Like, they love his stuff. They've tweaked his delivery already. But you might want him to be pitching.
Yeah, I don't know where he factors in.
Yeah,
I don't know where he factors in yet. And then Cantillo, Allen, you could throw Nikhazy in here too. I would say
non-roster invites in there too.
Sure.
You're going to have room on the 40-man roster if you really like what you see out of Vince Velasquez in spring training, And maybe he's not the best example because he's coming off an injury, so maybe you'd want to start him slow. But Colby Allard, like maybe you really like what he's giving you, and you don't want to lose him. I mean, there are options here.
Yeah, they've done this before. They did it last year. They find a way to get somebody onto the roster that isn't the greatest fit, or you don't know how they fit initially, but as you said, they don't want to lose that guy. And so they'll just put him on the roster now, and then we'll see what happens as the season starts to unfold. But between, let's just say, the guys that are currently rostered, I would put Cantillo ahead of Logan Allen. The fact that Cantillo was on a postseason roster, Logan Allen was nowhere to be found.
Yep.
And late in the year, they trusted Cantillo. I would say starting today, Cantillo's ahead of Logan Allen. But it really doesn't take much in spring to at least get yourself right back into the mix. You have a couple of good outings to begin with, and I'm not even talking necessarily about scouting the stat line at the end of the day, but I am looking at, are you nibbling on the corners? Are you just letting your stuff go? Are you striking anybody out? Are you missing bats at all? Are you avoiding walks? Things that I think any pitcher you want to see early in spring training.
Yeah. It's tough. I feel like it's got to be tough mentally when you have a season where you're just lost at sea. And you get feedback, you have an idea of what you need to fix and get better at, but you're probably sitting there wondering, like, did I show enough today? Were there enough guys standing there with iPads when I was throwing on field 2 that saw how sharp my slider was? Like, it's difficult, and I think that's also like what I love about spring training is it's just like this slow, steady build. And people will ask on February 19th, like, all right, what do you think I'll do a roster projection. What do you think, who's going to be in the rotation? And by March 19th, it's completely different. And you look back to February 19th and you're like, it seemed so obvious at the time, and 3 of those guys aren't even in there. I think last year is a good example of that because everybody had the flu or was injured on the pitching staff. So, yeah, it'll be interesting, but it's tough. It's sometimes it can be tough to like nudge your way into the equation, but then once you're there, you stick because guys get injured, or you just, you know what I mean? Like you get called up, you think it's a spot start, but you pitch well, and someone else gets injured, and you wait, you blink, and you've been in the big leagues for 15 years. So it's just a matter of like making some you said it, like just attack the strike zone and stop falling behind in counts and then having to throw your fastball where hitters can crush it. Same thing for McKenzie. And that's something you can show off in spring training, and suddenly you're thought of in a much better light.
It's not like we're going back. If you go back 4 years ago, he had this good stretch. Mm-hmm. It was we're one season removed from that, where he looked like a very fine back-end starter. And it wasn't like he was someone that just kind of emerged out of nowhere. No one knew who he was. This is a guy that had prospect pedigree, and people talked about as being a capable back-end starter. So did he just lose all of that? Or is he a few adjustments away from being back to being that guy?
Keep in mind, he was incredible in the minor leagues, and then he had a rough go at it at AAA. And he came back, and he said it was like the toughest thing he'd ever been through, and he had to figure out, like, wait, guys can hit my stuff? Like, this is crazy. And he adjusted back, and he was great again. So sometimes you just need to get hit in the mouth, and then you figure out how to avoid getting hit in the mouth a second time.
Yeah. Or legitimately, in what start? He got hit and came back and was pretty solid.
Yeah.
This last one is a big no-duh once you actually hear it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is a big spring for him. George Valera.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's always been something in his way, whether it's performance, whether it's poor on-field decisions, whether it's injuries. And this is a guy that's now coming back off a knee surgery. This is like his last, even though he's gotten no shot in Cleveland, this is his last shot to prove he's worth of any bit of anything for this team. And right now it would feel like a surprise if he even brought any sort of production to this club. This is a guy that was 2-3 years ago one of your top prospects in the system. So I'll be very focused on him to see what we can see out of Valera this spring.
We have to make sure he's fully healthy and ready to go. Initially, he was supposed to be out 6 to 9 months, and then Vogt said at a press conference a couple weeks ago that he'll be good, even though it's only been like 4, maybe 5 months. So you got to see how healthy he is and if they're going to let him just go without any restrictions. I think with him, it is so important to just adjust our expectations. Yes, it was not that long ago where you're thinking, oh my God, this is the answer to all their outfield troubles over all these years. This guy can be in right field and he can crush home runs and draw a ton of walks. It's kind of like a Carlos Santana profile at the plate. And he just has not hit lefties. So if you can adjust your expectations and say, get him healthy, stick him in right field or DH, and have him just face right-handed pitching. This is a guy who last year at AAA had an 864 OPS against righties. There's always going to be home runs. There's going to be doubles. There's going to be walks. There's going to be strikeouts. But a very useful hitter if he's used right and he's healthy and it translates to the big leagues that way. Though that's a humongous if. But I do think we sprint away from these prospects when they hit some adversity. And it's just, when we haven't seen a guy, it's easy to dream and be like, well, this guy's a top 50 prospect. Like, I mean, I was guilty of this with Tyler Freeman. I thought Tyler Freeman would be an excellent major league hitter. And it hasn't worked out. That doesn't mean he's never going to be a useful big leaguer, though. In the same way that Valera, like, in a certain role, if he's healthy, like, it might be an option that makes sense. So I don't know when that is. There's less pressure now because he was taken off the 40-man roster. He's on a minor league deal. He could go to AAA to start the season, get healthy, and you call him up at some point if you aren't ready for DeLauder. Or maybe one of those guys is injured, you call up the other. I don't know. But there's still a skill set in here that should be able to be useful in the major leagues. And just because he's not that top 25 prospect we thought he could be 2 or 3 years ago, like, I think he's 24 years old, just turned 24 in November. Like, the book doesn't have to be written about him yet. Like, there's still some talent there. He's got to stay healthy, which is a humongous hurdle, and just be put in the right situations, and maybe he can be a useful piece.
The way I look at it is I'm not holding the door open for him anymore, but if he kicks it down, I'm not going to stand in his way. That's the way I would view it.
Yeah.
If you go into spring training and Will Brennan's just kind of, Will Brennan, who I think his role as being more of a fourth outfielder, reserve, slide in anywhere, much better than just being the fat side platoon right fielder. I feel like we can all agree that Brennan, as he stands right now, unless he makes some significant changes, that's probably his better role, is more of a reserve guy. If Noel just kind of looks fine, and maybe he's crushing lefties, but that's it, and the Lauder's had a fine spring, but you're not ready to give him the call. If Valera just is healthy and looks good and looks better than some of these other options, I'm not going to hesitate. I don't think you should. I would, for as much as the injuries have gotten in the way and the performance hasn't been a total success on any front, other than maybe just, as you're saying, just an ability to hit righties in the minor leagues, I still would feel somewhat guilty and feel like I missed something if I never gave him any shot in the major leagues. Any. Like, you can't find some at-bats for him to just tell us what he is instead of us sitting here trying to project what he is based on his talent. Let him tell us what he is based on his performance and then give him the chances if he earns them.
Carlos Santana might have a really good year. I have no idea. Age 39 scares me. Would it have been the worst thing in the world to just roll with Manzardo at first and then leave DH open for Noel / Fry / Valera / DeLauder with some of those guys playing a little bit of right field too? I don't know. That would have been kind of interesting. It's a way to keep Valera and DeLauder healthy too. I also don't really understand where Fry fits once he comes back, unless he's simply turning Manzardo into a part-time DH.
I don't think you need to figure that out today, though.
I know. Stuff works out. Just saying. It's tougher to get a good read on, especially if you're going to give Brennan a shot here, tougher to get a good read on Noel and Valera and DeLauder when you've got DH occupied.
I will say, if you sign Carlos Santana and he's just used the best way possible, meaning that his performance has dictated, hey, he's only good against lefties, he's only playing sporadically against righties, I can see a scenario where you're better off having a Santana around. What I'm fearful of is you've paid him enough money, and because of his career and because he's also what he's meant to this organization and now his 3 stints here, that they're going to be committed to playing him. And if he's continues performing, no problem with it. But I hope they're able to adapt off of it. If he's not performing against righties the way that I do have some fear about it, I'm just hopeful that they're willing to adjust their plans, even though they paid him the amount of money to be the everyday first baseman.
15% of their payroll. So is that going to equal the short side of the platoon at first base? I don't know about that. I agree with you.
But hey, maybe he keeps pushing Father Time further into the distance.
Can I get a T.J. Zuppe bobblehead to put back here somewhere?
You sure you could fit it on the shelf with the ego I have? No.
My Miles Garrett bobblehead. He wants out.
Put me on a different shelf, a winning shelf. This episode was all over the place, but I had fun doing it. Hopefully you did too.
Training is here. Do you hear the baseballs whacking the mitts? The sound of the crack of the bat? It's all here.